Hi, my name is Desiree. I'm 25. I work as a nurse in the United States and I'm from Ithaca, New York. I've been volunteering in Kathmandu, Nepal at a hospital. So why did you choose to volunteer in Nepal, Kathmandu? What programs are you doing and why? So I wanted to go to another country and expand my horizons more into global health. And I wanted to go to Asia and I didn't know where I had wanted to go initially. So I had watched this documentary about Nepal and it interested me in Nepal, and I ended up doing some research regarding Nepal and saw that it was a pretty easygoing place and it was good for solo travel, which is what caused me to choose it. I came here for a medical program and worked in a hospital, and I did this program because I had done some other medical programs in Ecuador and Africa, and I just wanted to do something that was more based in global health, which is why I chose a broader view. What was the most surprising thing you experienced while in the program? I was surprised to see the level of acuity of patients that were treated at this hospital specifically. The hospital was mostly a burn hospital, and some of these burns were really extensive, and they ended up doing these really large, well-done grafts at the hospital, and they were beautiful to see. But unfortunately, I saw a lot of the nurses blatantly making up vital signs and doing some things that weren't necessarily ethical, and I was surprised to see that because the level of care at the hospital was generally pretty high. Also, privacy in healthcare in Nepal doesn't seem to be a priority, and it seems that all patients kind of know each other's business when they're in a hospital or in any kind of a healthcare setting. In terms of my host family, I was surprised to see how accommodating they were and how frequently they checked up on me. I usually take a while to warm up to people, but I felt really comfortable just walking into their house and sitting down in their common area with them. In the country, I was surprised how little was invested in the infrastructure and regarding the roads. There was such a large impact on the time that it took to travel because of the condition of the roads, and traffic was pure chaos as a result, and a lot of the traffic laws weren't followed, which caused a lot of accidents. In the hospital specifically, I saw 3 different people who had their foot run over by a car or a bike just because they were walking on the road without a sidewalk to help protect them. What was the most difficult thing you experienced while at the program? In the hospital, like I said before, I watched some practices that were difficult for me to watch. So for example, the nurses would pull what they'd call a crust, or what I would refer to as a scab, off of some of the wounds, and it would constantly make the patients re-bleed and open up the skin, which would cause an issue with skin integrity. Or I saw them making up vital signs, like I said. And so it was hard for me to jump in because these practices weren't things that I wanted to engage in, because this is never something that I would do myself in my own nursing practice back in the United States. In terms of the host family, at first the language barrier was difficult between people because I wasn't able to navigate exactly what I needed, but once I started learning Nepali, that became a lot easier and also became quite fun. In the country, I didn't care for how often I had to haggle for everything because I'm pretty used to everything having a fixed cost or a fixed price, and I'm not having to question that. And here you get upcharged a lot, and it's hard to try to bring the price down to something that's more reasonable. Any tips for future volunteers? It's important to be conservative in how you're dressing, to cover your knees, your chest, and your shoulders, but it's not necessarily as important to wear skirts all the time like you might be advised, or anything along those lines. A lot of people here dress quite modernly. They wear a lot of jeans and a lot of more tight-fitting clothing, and it's not that as important to dress as conservatively as you might imagine. If you go to work at this hospital specifically, you are issued scrubs and you wear their facility scrubs on a daily basis, so you don't actually need to bring scrubs to Nepal with you. In terms of sightseeing, it always costs tourists more money to get into any of like the temples or sightseeing touristy areas, so just make sure that you have enough money to cover that. Donations. So it's important to bring the donations to the hospital administrator if you go to this hospital, because if you bring them to the nurses, they might not know exactly what to do with them or where they're best allocated. And what's interesting is that the patients have to buy their own gloves themselves, and then they're used by the nurses as needed just for that patient alone. So using their gloves is kind of a touchy subject. So bringing your own gloves is a really good idea, and also important because they use small and extra small, and if you have larger hands, you won't be able to fit into their gloves and will likely rip them every time you try to put them on. Also bringing masks is a good idea because the nurses do like to wear masks and they run out of masks quite often, and the patients aren't the ones that buy those. In terms of laundry and internet, laundry is easy to get to. Internet is mostly good, but sometimes it's inconsistent. I had luckily bought a gigabyte of data ahead of time, which was really helpful, especially if I wasn't even around Wi-Fi. And I was always able to connect to the internet if I didn't have Wi-Fi available. Other things volunteers should know about. In the city and town, it takes a long time to get anywhere because of the roads. Just going a couple kilometers, it can take like 30 minutes or so, and so you have to make sure that you plan enough time to get to different places. The weather. I'm here in October and November. The weather is mostly warm, but it's kind of cold in the morning. So it's important to layer, because I would go out and be really cold in the morning and then get hotter later in the day. I wanted to take off some clothes. The local people, depending on the way that you look, local people will most definitely stop and stare and be really curious about you and what you're doing. And I found myself getting into a lot of conversations, even standing at the bus stop, because people wanted to know what I was up to. And it became like a daily occurrence, especially the children will stop and talk to you a lot because they want to know what's going on. Tours. I went on a tour to Pokhara for 3 days, and I went up to the World Peace Pagoda and Devi's Falls, and then the cave right across the street from Devi's Falls. And I went with a private driver, and it was great and really, really accommodating, and it was really easy to get around, and having the private driver was actually a really easy experience for me to navigate. So a personal paragraph or a volunteer testimonial. Before coming to Nepal, I was told that I had to come here being as flexible and open-minded as I possibly could be. And that made me wonder exactly what I was getting myself into, but I tried to come here with that in mind. So I came here as a nurse, and my plan was to try to get more into global health. And I was connected to a hospital that was focused largely on burns. It was a plastic surgery and reconstructive surgery hospital, but they mostly did burns. At first, I found it really hard to connect with the nurses because though everyone's capable of speaking English, some people are nervous about speaking English. And so I wasn't able to really have the language to communicate with them effectively in order to build relationships. And it was after I started taking Nepali lessons that they started becoming more interested in me, probably because I was showing an interest in their language, and also maybe because I was willing to fumble over a language to communicate with them. They were then willing to try to communicate more with me in English, and that was really important to how I eventually felt really integrated into the hospital environment. So I ended up just taking more of like an assistive role at the hospital. I was there with the nurses, and I decided that rather than this being more of a working opportunity, I decided it was going to be more of a learning opportunity, and I did learn a lot about grafts and burns and reconstructive surgery, which was something that I haven't experienced, and so that was really worthwhile. But I ended up just assisting and not necessarily cleaning the wounds, but helping them to dress them and tape the dressings to keep them secure and stuff like that. I did have the opportunity to go into the operating theater, which was really great, and it's a really easygoing environment, and the doctors are really interested in teaching, and so that ended up being a really worthwhile experience. One thing that I did that I really enjoyed while I was here is that I had the opportunity to teach a CPR class to a group of 15 nurses here, and they said that they had never had any kind of formal training in CPR whatsoever, but when I started going over like the ratios that they needed to know, or any of the numbers or information, they were all able to answer the questions before I asked them. And so I knew that they had some information about it, but what seemed to be lackluster in their education was just the implementation of CPR. So we had a dummy set up, and I made all of the nurses go through 5 rounds of compressions, switching back and forth between compressions and giving the breaths, and it ended up being a really great, worthwhile experience for everyone, themselves and myself included in that. And I really enjoyed teaching, which made me feel like maybe I should have gotten more involved in a teaching environment while I was here. So how would I describe my accommodation? My accommodation was really comfortable. I felt really safe here, and I always felt like I was at home. Since I was the only volunteer the majority of the time, I had the entire homestay to myself and had a bathroom to myself, and I never felt out of place here. In terms of the meals, all the food was great. In the morning they made more of like a Western breakfast for people who aren't used to eating so many different Asian foods all the time. Every night there's dal bhat, but there's different variations of dal bhat, and it's seasoned really nicely and it's not too spicy, and so it's really easy to eat on a daily basis, and I didn't have any issues with food or getting sick here. The security, there was lots of ways that I could lock up my stuff, and I had a locked room, so I never felt like myself or any of my belongings were at risk. The host family is really nice, and they make you feel like part of the family. They also know a lot about the area and are really great about giving you recommendations of places to go and how to get there. Or many times I asked, like, how can I buy this or where can I buy this? And they would just show me and bring me to that place to get that. What was my favorite memory of this trip in regards to the program? So my favorite memory in the program was one day in the operating theater. I was invited to go in, and a doctor turned on some familiar music, and everyone was singing this music that I also knew all together, and it ended up being this like nice moment of a shared connection over them sitting there trying to do surgery on this kid's hand. The host family, one time I went out with them during the day and we all traveled around the city together, and we stopped and had some food together at a pizza place, and that was a really nice time because I like having meals with others. The country, I had a really great time traveling to Pokhara, which is like a paradise in Nepal, and I met some really wonderful people, and we all had dinner together, and it ended up being this like melting pot dinner, and we over a shared meal, and we all had different backgrounds, and it ended up being this really great time for me in which I was able to get to know a lot of different people and a lot more about Nepal and their travels through Nepal. How was the local ABV coordinator, the staff, and the support provided in country? So at the airport, when I got to the airport, I navigated through security and got outside, and as soon as I got outside I found the coordinator. It was really simple to find. I was given a red scarf. He helped me exchange money right off the bat, and then we traveled back to their house in their private vehicle. Orientation day, I was given a PowerPoint presentation for orientation, and then I was taken to be taught how to navigate the bus system, and went to a local spot that's a tourist area but also like a religious site, and I was taught how to navigate the city and where to find an ATM to get money out, and how to do laundry, and another place that I could eat if I needed to get out. Daily support, I was checked in on daily, usually at dinner or coming up to my room to see how I was doing, or through a text message. How was the information you received from ABV prior to traveling? Was there anything missing or that should be included? The information that I was given prior was sufficient and mostly accurate. The one thing that I thought was different was that how they said that all the clothes that I had to bring, I didn't necessarily think I needed to bring as many utility clothes that they had explained. Are you willing to speak to other potential ABV volunteers? Yes, I'd be willing to speak to other volunteers.